Reverend Joseph Alwyn Roberts was a writer, broadcaster and a former vicar of Llangai Parish near Bangor in Wales. He wrote several books on religion and the paranormal. He was also a broadcaster and expert on the supernatural, and especially his experience of ghosts. In 2018, he died at Bangor, Wales at the age of 99. The following are two fascinating paranormal stories that he'd covered in his time as a vicar and ghostbuster. The plane crash. The following incident happened to a woman called Elizabeth Pritchard when, during an out-of-body experience, observed a plane crash that her son had been involved in. It was World War II, and Elizabeth Pritchard's only son, Hefin, was sent to Canada by the Royal Air Force. Elizabeth and her husband William ran a general store and post office in Bangor, Gwynedd, northwest Wales. And one November night, she sat up in bed extremely agitated and woke up her husband and told him that their son Hefin had been in an awful accident and was afraid he was dead. Her husband believed she just had a terrible dream and tried to calm her, but she insisted she had seen their son's plane crash with her own eyes. She described it as if she were at the scene of the accident and could hear him shout "Mum, Mum" in her sleep. In her vivid dream, there was a powerful blizzard, and Elizabeth said she could not even see her hands in front of her face. She could hear the sound of a bomber plane, and then saw the shape of the plane flying very low, and through the blizzard she could just make out the black shape of a plane crashing into a mountain. She then saw the nose of the plane buried in the snow, and waited to see if any of the airmen emerged from the wreckage, and could see smoke come from under the left wing. Elizabeth waited and waited, but nothing happened. It was now very quiet and had stopped snowing, and Elizabeth decided to approach the plane and went inside and saw 5 men who appeared to be dead. They were lying on the floor face down. She then saw a man at the back of the plane who had also passed. She then saw her son Hefin lying on the floor of the plane face down and could see that he'd hit his head and there was a lot of blood, and his leg was twisted right around as if it didn't belong to him. Her husband insisted that she must have been dreaming, but Elizabeth could not be consoled. Her son regularly sent letters, but for some reason they'd stopped coming, which further added to Elizabeth's belief that something serious had happened to him, and waited desperately for a letter to arrive. It would be 3 weeks until a letter would finally arrive, which indicated to Elizabeth that maybe it really was just a dream. In the letter, her son said it had been temporarily moved from flying duties and had been transferred to another base in Canada. The move meant that any leave that was due had been postponed, and it would be 6 months before he could come home. Fortunately, time passed quickly, and the day came that they were ready to pick up their son from Bangor Station after returning from Canada. As the train door opened, they could see their son waving at them with an airman's kit bag thrown onto their platform, and then saw their son leaning heavily on a crutch. When they arrived home, his father pointed to the wounds and asked him what had happened. He then told his father what his mother already knew, that he had been flying on a training trip over Alaska with 5 other men on the plane and got caught up in a terrible blizzard. They'd been flying low in order to get a bearing and then crashed into a mountain where his leg had been smashed and 4 others in the plane had died. Luckily, another plane had been flying close behind, and the pilot had been able to give it accurate position readings when it flew back to base, and rescue planes had reached them fairly quickly, where he was unfortunately the only survivor. He later found that 4 of the crew had been killed on impact, and he himself was unconscious when they found him, and he was bleeding badly from a head wound and a shattered leg. His father asked him when the accident took place, but at this point his mother interjected with the accurate information that it happened at 1 a.m. in the morning of Thursday the 17th of November the previous year. Everything their son had described to his mother was seen in accurate detail because she'd either had an out-of-body experience or her physical body had somehow been projected. Either way, she had seen everything that her son had described. However, what would have happened if her son had regained consciousness in the plane whilst his mother was viewing the accident? Would he have seen her ghostly apparition, or would she have appeared as a solid human being? The haunted couple. One night, a young couple by the name of Peter and Zoe were suddenly awoken when their blankets were being slowly pulled from the bed, exposing them to a freezing December night. Peter then opened his eyes, and about 1 foot from his startled face was the leering head of a ghost. The apparition looked to be that of a middle-aged woman, which then stepped back from the bed and stood by the door, pointing an accusing finger at him. Peter tried to scream, but no sound came out of his mouth. He was frozen in fear. Zoe then gave a piercing shriek before leaping out of bed and racing into the night, with Peter following close behind. The terrified couple immediately called on the Reverend Alwyn Roberts, who was known in the district as the Holy Ghostbuster, along with his assistant medium Elwyn Roberts. The couple told them that before the ghost had appeared, they'd been hearing mysterious scratching on the floorboards under the bed. The two Ghostbusters and the young couple then went back to their freezing house in the Welsh Hills in the middle of the night and lit the stove as they waited for the ghost to reappear. The medium Elwyn suddenly said, "She's here all right. She's standing by the kitchen door, not sure whether to come further or not." She then asked the Reverend to talk to her. The Reverend was quite fearless and had experienced many ghosts in his lifetime and said, "Come along, come nearer to us. We have come to your house to help you. Tell us if something is troubling you." The medium was able to communicate with the spirit and found that her name was Hannah Roberts. In order to find the period of time in which she had lived, Reverend Roberts asked, "What was the name of your minister?" "Minister?" spat the ghost, speaking through the medium. "That man is a minister of the devil, sending all our young men to the trenches to be killed." Reverend Roberts knew immediately that she meant preacher John Williams, who had become a recruiting officer in Anglesey in Wales and had sent many men off to die in the First World War. Then the spirit said, "Why don't these people help me find the deeds of the farm? The papers William hid before he went off to war," she demanded. Then she disappeared, leaving the young couple very shaken as they realised the scraping they'd heard under the bed had been the ghost of Hannah Roberts searching for the missing farmhouse deeds. The couple then put the kettle on, and as they settled down to a cup of tea, Zoe suddenly froze in fear, her finger pointing at the kitchen door. There, she said. Reverend Roberts then looked around and could see the faint outline of a woman. She was a little woman, about 60, with short grey hair and the ruddy cheeks of an outdoor person. They found that the ghost was not nasty or vindictive, but turned out to be a nice homely lady, and was actually enjoying herself. She couldn't resist a chance to shock people and take centre stage. Reverend Roberts later confirmed that Hannah Roberts had lived at the farm until her husband William was killed in the Battle of Ypres in Belgium in World War I, and she'd been moved out because she could not find the deeds. Afterwards, Peter and Zoe rang Reverend Roberts to tell him that their ghostly visitor Hannah is still with them, and they did not want to get rid of her anymore. "Now that we have seen her, we found she was a lovely old lady. We really don't mind." In fact, the couple would later hold regular ghost parties in the house, where they enjoyed sitting in the dark with their friends, and whenever Peter called out to the spirit, Hannah would knock twice on the table